Hello friends, a very warm welcome to UnSarkari. I am Vikas Bhardwaj. In understanding role of different constitutions in inspiring different elements for India, it is very important to see that how India blended those ideas with its own requirements, aspirations of the people, and the plurality and the civilizational aspect of India. It is in this regard, let's see what we can compare between India and the Russian constitution scheme because both of them are very important to understand from the examination perspective. When we see from the historical context, India became a republic in 1950, and we already have known that it a diverse and a democratic republic setup. USSR, it was in 1936. Lenin is going to play a very important role, and then in 1977, communist ideology will be at the center. One party rule, unlike India, and socialist principles, these are the three keywords. Post 1993, it will be emphasizing upon democracy, but not the way India is. And also there will be separation of powers and most importantly, presidential dominance. So critically what we can say, Indian constitution was born from pluralism, whereas USSR have been inspired from communist ideology and there has been a transition post 1993. So what is the nature of state? So India, very key word is sovereign socialist secular democratic republic. But in case of USSR, it was a socialist state under one communist party monopoly. And Russia, it is a federal, very important, federal semi-presidential republic. So India balances socialism with democracy. USSR subordinated democracy to the ideology of communism. Russia emphasizes executive power. What communism is, what kind of ideas you can say in socialism, we have discussed in our other lectures. So, federal structure is going to emphasize upon India being a quasi-federal structure, a strong center with states having limited autonomy as we have discussed in our polity series, whereas USSR is Union of Republics, which is theoretically federal, okay, theoretically, but practically it is centralized under Communist Party. Russia, post 1993, it is a federal structure with republics and regions. Autonomy is often curtailed by central executive. Very important. So India's federalism is centralizing, but it is functional. It is not one-way street towards center. USSR was symbolic, and the Russia's federal in law, but it is said centralized in practice. So, fundamental rights. Both are having fundamental rights, both India and USSR. But in case of India, it is enforceable by courts. But in case of Russia, it is subordinated to socialist duties. So no independent enforcement is there. Whereas in case of Russia, rights are guaranteed post 1993, but enforcement is often weak because executive is dominating. So India's rights are judicially protected. USSR are based upon ideological promises and Russia's are constitutional but they are politically constrained. Please remember, if you use right vocabulary, then only you are going to get some score. Similarly, directive principles and duties, very important. Directive principles guide state policy. Fundamental duties of India are inspired by USSR. In USSR, duties emphasize loyalty to socialism and it also emphasizes collective responsibility, collective, what we say as fraternity. So Russia, post 1993, duties also include tax obligations, military service, respect for law. But India is having a balanced approach. Okay, whereas US is prioritizing duties over rights. That is not the case with India. So when we see origin, then India had fundamental rights in the beginning, but no explicit duties. USSR constitution from the very beginning is emphasizing upon duties alongside rights, and it is stressing upon the loyalty to socialism and collective responsibility, as we have already read. India borrowed the idea of balancing rights with duties from USSR model, and that is where you will get a question. So India adopted 42nd Amendment Act 1976, introduced fundamental duties in Part 4A and Article 51A. And we can say duties, fundamental duties are inspired by USSR. So duties like respecting the constitution, promoting harmony, safeguarding public property, defending the nation, preserving heritage, inculcating scientific temperament and so forth, they are all inspired by the USSR. So duties in India were added during emergency era. So that means a push for discipline, a push for civic responsibility. So the scope, like in India, there are 11 fundamental duties. Like I said, respect National symbols protect environment, uphold scientific temper, whereas duties focused upon socialist loyalty, labor, defense, or you can say military service and collective welfare. So what is critical to understand is that India adopted duties to democratic pluralism. It is not again one way pushing citizens, but USSR is trying to tie them with ideological conformity. In India, there is no ideological conformity, there is independence, and constitution is supreme. So what analytically we can say that India is actually following the path of rights balancing with responsibilities. Civic duties strengthening national unity and discipline, like we can say Vande Bharat train, like we can say Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, and so forth. Limitations are there because duties in India are non-justiciable. They are not legally enforceable. Whereas, unlike USSR, what we can say in India, you can actually follow certain themes, certain norms, but in USSR, there is a binding social obligation. So, the key word to understand is that India transformed an ideological tool of the USSR into a moral educational framework. So, that is a very positive thing, and that is why it is being inculcated among the future citizens, inculcating among students, and so forth. Executive system, when we say India is following parliamentary democracy, prime minister is reading, president is ceremonial. In USSR, supreme Soviet word was there and Politburo determined everything. No separation of power was there. In Russia, semi-presidential and a very strong executive authority is there with the president. So India's executive is accountable to parliament. USSR was party controlled and Russia is presidentially centralized. So Prime Minister is accountable to Lok Sabha and can be removed by no confidence vote. But the Prime Minister of Russia is accountable to State Duma. But it is the President who is dominating executive authority. So India's parliamentary system is ensuring legislative supremacy, whereas Russia's semi-presidential system it is tilting power towards the president who is not accountable in a way like the way Indian government is. Federal balance, when we say, then India is federal in form, okay, but unitary in spirit. That's why none of the states can go away, none of the states can talk about separation. Center dominates in emergencies, and center is also having control over residuary powers also. But in Russia, federal structure is there with republics and regions. Federation Council reflects regional interests, but it often aligns with central executive. So that means a tilt is there towards central executive. In India, the parliament centralizes power, whereas Russia's parliament symbolizes federalism, but it is overshadowed by presidential authority. That is very important to see. So, judiciary, independent judiciary with judicial reviews there in India. In Russia, judiciary is subordinate to Communist Party, so no independent review was there in USSR. Whereas in case of Russia, post 1993, constitutional court exists, but limited by executive influence. So in India, judiciary is guardian of the constitution. USSR, it was symbolic. Russia, it is constrained by politics. But amendment process, let's see. Then India is flexible. Parliament is amending it, but there is a judicial check. For example, basic structure doctrine. Whereas USSR, amendment is controlled by the Communist Party. There is no real debate. And in Russia, amendment requires parliamentary approval. And sometimes referendums can also be there, but there is complete control, or you can say more control in the hands of president through presidential power. So India's amendment balanced flexibility with judicial limits. USSR was ideological. Russia reflects executive consolidation. When we say structure of parliament, so Lok Sabha, lower house, Rajya Sabha, upper house. Russia, State Duma, lower house. That means Lok Sabha is equal to State Duma. And Federation Council, that is upper house, like Rajya Sabha. So both are bicameral, but India's Rajya Sabha represents states indirectly, whereas Russia's Federation Council directly represent the regions. That is a very, very crucial difference. So India's Lok Sabha elected by citizens through first past the post system, we know, and Rajya Sabha is elected by state legislatures, whereas Russia State Duma elected via mixed system. What is mixed system? Proportional and direct. And Federation Council members appointed by regional governments. That means India is emphasized upon direct popular mandate. Russia blends proportional representation system along with regional appointment. That means again president is very powerful and executive is having an influence. So in India, Lok Sabha, that means power is lying with the Lok Sabha to control finances, passes laws, hold government accountable, and there is confidence vote also. But in Russia, State Duma, it is passing laws, approves prime minister, but limited in checking the presidential power. So Lok Sabha is central to executive accountability. That's what we can say in India. But State Duma is weaker. That is why presidential dominance is there. Powers of the upper house, when we say Rajya Sabha can review legislations, it is representing states, it is having limited financial powers. But in Russia, the Federation Council is approving laws affecting regions, ratifying treaties, and authorizing use of the armed forces. That means certain power is there. And Russia's upper house has a stronger constitutional power than Rajya Sabha. Legislative culture, then we say, then India is having a vibrant and also a very, very strong role of the opposition. But in Russia, more controlled debates, limited opposition influence, and there is executive dominance also. That means India's parliament reflects pluralism and contestation. Russia's reflect managed democracy. That means overall we can say parliament is at the heart of democracy in India. It is challenged by disruption and central dominance and bitterness between opposition and party in power. And in Russia, parliament exists but functions are under the shadow of powerful presidency. That also means India's legislature is more autonomous and representative, where Russia is structurally strong but politically constrained. In terms of legacy, longest surviving democratic constitution in the world, that is India. USSR collapsed under authoritarian rigidity. Russia is following a hybrid system of constitutional democracy with authoritarian tendencies. That means India adopted certain methods and ways and it went on to survive and thrive. Whereas USSR became little rigid, it went on to collapse. Russia went on to emerge with a new constitution, but there is a struggle between democracy and centralization. These elements and ideas will help you to create a kind of a setup in your notes, which will definitely help you to write a wonderful answer and also answering during your interview. Thank you very much for being with us at UnSarkari. Wishing you all success for your exam. Do like, share, subscribe, and join our courses for success.